So Nickelodeon's been popping off with plenty of new original projects of the animated variety. After a presumed drought of content for the community to fawn over, this year has firmly cemented itself as the year of the Nicktoon. And as chaotic a year as it's been, it's one in some ways that certainly harkens back to that old school slime-drenched mayhem of old. Yet, with all the new arrivals causing a ruckus on the main channel, its sister network, Nick Jr., had yet to present a new yearly title. It hasn't been too long with that one, especially with the advent of the pandemic looming over content creation of all types. But we had yet to receive any new entries until a new key player finally washed ashore.
Santiago and his crew, sailing the seas off to the rescue.
Santiago of the Seas is indeed the newest animated offering to touch down on the world's first kids network. It centers around the aforementioned pirate captain and his adventures in and around Isla Encanta, protecting and discovering ancient treasures from figures of old. He's accompanied by Tomas, his enthusiastic guitar-playing cousin, Lorelai, a knowledgeable and friendly mermaid, and Kiko, his faithful frog. While they embark on great journeys, they'll encounter nefarious enemies like the infamous Bonnie Bones, but by the end of the day, they'll always end up right on course, ready to set sail for the next voyage. It only came out last week, but it's already set itself up quite well. That first episode serves to be a proper origin story for Santiago and his new seafaring vessel, El Bravo. Starting off as just an ordinary kid, we follow him in pursuit of rediscovering the mysteries behind Capitan Calavera and his possessions. Along the way, he finds his way as an authentic pirate outfitted with new threads and a legendary ship, of course. Though Santi is essentially the new pirate on the block, he's still imbued with the same spirit to help literally anyone in need of it. That's why when the enterprising troublemaker Bonnie pulls up to plunder Calavera's treasure, he and his mateys readily step up to the plate to get it back. Aesthetically, visually, and narratively, this series is just so rich, not even a real swashbuckler could grasp all of it in one setting. I mean, as much as I love One Piece, I don't know, man, it might have some competition coming up. I really appreciate the cinematic vibe they let the show have. You know, based on what I've read in interviews and such, it's a welcome surprise for Nick to let the production get a bit more suspenseful and action-packed. We still have a lighthearted product, but I imagine these stories will be party to a bigger sense of scale than would normally be allowed. I caught wind of someone saying it was Nick Jr.'s first creator-driven property, and not quite. But it definitely does take ample stock in its settings and characters. The visual design is also really, really nice. Malaysian studio Lemon Sky was tasked with bringing this world to life, and that they did skillfully. The more complex texturing and intricate details rendered adds a great flourish to such a colorful world. There's a lot to look at, but at their core, the character models feel simple enough not to crowd the space. It's funny because their heritage lies in game design more than anything, as their client list is long and prolific with titles such as Final Fantasy VII, Anthem, Tekken, Mortal Kombat 11, and way more. Though, to round things out, they've also done animation work for select episodes of Big City Greens and Future Worm, among others. Unlike most Nick Jr. properties, this one got a virtual press junket to accompany its premiere. There's probably dozens of micro-interviews up offering a service-level peek into what's to come. I got more out of the written interviews personally. It's probably no coincidence most of those are carried out by animation-focused publications. All the love and passion poured into production really came out in these intimate conversations. Santiago's cultural legacy is its most prominent strength. Its roots in Latin Caribbean culture and folklore drenches every bit of this show, from the character philosophies to the bombastic music. It really embeds a lot of great ideological virtues into the narrative too, such as the importance of teamwork and family. It's less so their features themselves that make the product so great, but the way it ties into the show's identity and everything around it. The series is in a very unique position to elevate the culture and the people around it, and it capitalizes thusly. So far, one episode in, every single character featured was voiced by a person of color. The characters are all diverse shades and builds. This is a true world of discovery. It's amazing to me how diverse this series is at all points, how it comports itself, and just how fun it can be in the process. It also amazes me what comparisons can be drawn to it with all these traits in mind. See, prior to the first episode dropping, a fair amount of comparisons have been thrown around in an attempt to describe what we were going to get, and they were not entirely truthful. 3 guesses as to what this was being compared to. Indeed, Jake and the Neverland Pirates does share a few baser characteristics with Santiago. Mainly the character makeup, the mystical settings, their collaboration-based philosophies, and their target demographics. Now, having seen all of Jake up to this point, I only more strongly confirm that this comparison is such a great disservice. No shade, no tea. It had a great run, and it has a lot to offer, but these 2 series methodologies are expressed quite differently. To me, Santiago's greatest strength does lie in its identity. Jake does a lot with its own historical roots and storytelling and the way it builds up its lore, but Santiago has channeled its cultural identity into a whole new world for us to discover. When Santi talks about the good pirates of legend, there's a deeper pride to that connection. When he dutifully recites tenets of the good pirate creed, you firmly believe that he lives by it.
A good pirate always stands by his matey.
So while Santiago of the Seas has already been making waves within the course of his story, the ripple effect has already begun to be felt out here. It'd come as a welcome surprise that Episode 1 dominated last week's premiere ratings on Nickelodeon. It surpassed the Friday ratings for new airings of The Casagrandes, Loud House, and even Paw Patrol. Yes, seriously. Granted, this was not a week where the latter overtook at least 1 million viewers, but the achievement is still quite extraordinary, especially if you consider how scheduling intended to lead in. Hopefully, Santiago can keep gaining momentum as its course picks up speed. Apparently, Nick didn't secure any toy deals for it to prepare for launch, so it's going to have to keep ahead of the pack in order to get some. In general, though, we've merely had 1 episode to get acquainted with this world. It feels practically lived in already. I have pretty high hopes for this taking off, but we need to keep supporting it whilst premieres are still fresh. This year has been really exhausting for everyone, but for people of color, it can feel even harder for us to just exist. So while this is not the ultimate solution to all societal ills, I think it's at least a bit of a bright spot among this continuous haze we're thrust into. The time for other people to start telling their own stories has been long overdue, and in animation, it's a mission that's perhaps more urgently needed. When kids see these characters in their media, it really does have an impact. The generations that grew up with Dora the Explorer and Gullah Gullah Island are starting to create their own content now, and it's great to see all that come to a head here. If we have to suffer through this perpetual hellscape, we might as well cozy up to some good quality stories while we do. So if you're rearing to take a look at the show, or you're still on the fence about it, I'll present you with a little opportunity. If you're watching this straight as of publishing, that means a new episode airs in about 20 minutes. Catch it if you can, or maybe DVR it, I don't know. And whenever you do, make sure to talk about it somewhere. Until then, take a moment to look back on what we've done before we disembark on our next adventure. We're sailing into uncharted territory, but the end result will surely end in us collecting a sizable bounty for the foreseeable future.